Most players believe a difficult river card costs them a big pot, but the expensive decision was often created by a mistake on the flop. My name is Brandon Sligh, and I am a professional poker player and coach who has been winning for 7 straight years. In this video, I will show you how to find that mistake so you stop reaching the river with no clear plan. This hand comes from a 1-3 game where we are $450 effective. I've raised to $12 from the cutoff with King Jack offsuit. It folds to the big blind and they call. This player is loose pre-flop, but they have been fairly straightforward after the flop. We go heads up to a flop of Jack 7-3 with 2 clubs. They check. I bet $18 into about 25 and they put in the call. The turn is the 9 of spades. They check again, and I decide to bet $50 into the $61 pot. My opponent thinks for a couple of seconds, calls, and now the pot is 161 going to the river. The 6 of clubs arrives, the club draw gets there, more straights are possible, and this fairly passive player leads into me for $130. This is where most players stare at the river card and try to solve the entire hand in the last 30 seconds. They start wondering if they have a flush, whether the bet is too big so they must be bluffing, and if top pair is too strong to fold. Now every part of the decision feels difficult because the pot is large and a lot of chips have already gone into the middle. The problem is the river did not create all of this by itself. I am going to pause the hand because seeing the result would make the decision look easier than it was. The big flop bet was not a mistake just because the river became ugly. The real mistake was placing out the bet without deciding which worst hands you wanted to call or what you were going to do after your opponent continued. Once another large bet is made on the turn and the overall plan is missing, it can start getting very expensive. If spots like this keep costing you money, this is exactly what I help players fix in my one-on-one coaching sessions. You will learn how to beat the exact poker games you're playing. Scan the QR code on screen or click the link in the pinned comment to see how coaching works. I call this the river rewind. When a river decision feels confusing, freeze the action and go back to the flop instead of only looking at the last card. You do not need to name every possible hand while the dealer waits on you. Start with the worst hands your flop bet was targeting. Then update the hands that would have continued after your opponent calls. Before putting more money in on the turn, properly range your opponent and come to a conclusion what hand can continue going to the river. Now that we are at the river, we have a better understanding of what our opponent has based on how it plays out. Let's focus more on each street starting with the flop. Knowing what you are targeting is the foundation of value betting, but a lot of players never take the time to answer it. They make top pair, see 2 clubs on the board, and place out a bet because checking feels weak. When I ask which worst hands they wanted to call, the answer is usually simple: a jack, a draw, or something like that. We need to be more specific. On Jack 7-3 with 2 clubs, Queen Jack, Jack 10, and Jack 9 can call. Club draws are going to continue. A pair of sevens may call at least once. This player can have a couple of straight draws or pair plus draw hands as well. Those are the hands the flop bet is trying to get value from. This means the flop bet can be completely fine. When all of these hands can continue and it is profitable for us, we want to give them that opportunity. The mistake happens when you make the bet only because you have top pair and never think about what their call means for the next street. Before you bet, name 2 or 3 groups of worst hands you expect to continue. You do not need to sit there for a minute trying to name every suit and combination. If you cannot name worst hands that will call, slow down before placing more chips into the pot. Once my opponent calls, I need to update their range of hands. Players love saying they called so they can still have anything. No, they cannot. The hands that would normally fold become less likely, while the hands willing to continue become a bigger part of what they can have. In this hand, I am not trying to put my opponent on one exact hold'em. I am looking at the range of hands that were willing to call the $18. Then the 9 of spades arrives. Jack 9 improves to 2 pair, 10-8 completes a straight, and 9-8 now has a pair with additional straight equity. Some of the weaker hands from the flop are still there, but the turn helped a portion of hands that were already willing to continue. Now look at the size I used. I bet $50 into a pot of 61 against someone who is loose pre-flop but becomes more straightforward after the flop. Queen Jack or Jack 10 may still call, and a strong club draw may continue, but the weaker pairs can begin folding when they face this much pressure. The 6 of clubs arriving later is not what makes the turn bet questionable. If a calling station is sitting in the big blind and will continue with every jack, every 7, and every draw, keep betting and make them pay. The specific player becomes more honest when the bets get large. This is where players become attached to the name of their hand. They say, I have top pair with a good kicker, so I have to bet again. Top pair does not require another bet. The player in front of you and the worst hands willing to call determine whether another value bet makes sense. Before putting out the $50, you should already have an idea of what King Jack would be after another call. Can I still value bet a clean river? Am I trying to reach showdown? Or will my hand become a bluff catcher when the board changes? You should be aware what another call does to the strength of your hand. After my opponent calls the turn, the pot is about 161 and the range reaching the river is stronger than the range that saw the flop. When it comes to 6 of clubs, some worse jacks can still be there, but so can 2 pair and flushes. When this passive player leads for 130, King Jack is no longer a value hand. The worst 1 pair hands I wanted to call earlier are not taking this line. At this point, my hand can only beat a bluff, which means it has become a bluff catcher. This does not mean you should fold 1 pair every time a bad river arrives. Against an aggressive opponent who can take a missed hand and fire, calling may be completely fine. Against the straightforward player in this example, the large river lead is telling us they have a very strong hand. The mistake is reaching this point without considering that another turn call will put me in this exact situation when the river is the 6 of clubs. The goal is to build a clear thought process before a difficult river decision gets expensive. I will find the biggest leaks in your game and build that process with you. I can help you win any low-stakes poker game by scanning the QR code or using the link in the pinned comment. Is there another line we could have used in this hand? There is, and it would be when the 9 of spades arrives on the turn. When my opponent checks, I do not have to place out another large bet just because I still have top pair. I can still be ahead of some hands in their range, but I also have to recognize how this player responds when a lot of chips go into the middle. In this example, we will check back. The check does not mean I believe I am behind. Checking keeps my opponent's weaker hands in the pot, and it also allows some missed draws to bluff later. I avoid using a size that may only get action from the stronger portion of their range. Now, the 6 of clubs arrives with about 61 in the pot instead. If my opponent bets $45, I still have a river decision, but I have not already placed 2 bets before facing it. Their range is also wider because I checked back, which gives an aggressive player and even the average player opportunities to bluff. Against someone who attacks turn checks with missed hands, King Jack may be a call. Against the passive player in this example, I am still going to decide what the bet means when the club draw gets there. Checking the turn did not guarantee an easy river. That is the entire point of the river rewind. I am not blaming the 6 of clubs for the problem. I am playing the entire hand out to better range my opponent based on all the factors in play. Now let's look at a different hand where checking the flop gives a worse hand the opportunity to put money in later. We are playing 1-3 and are $360 effective. I raised to $12 from the button with pocket nines, small blind folds. A straightforward player who has not gotten out of line calls from the big blind. We go heads up to a flop of 10-7 deuce with two clubs, and my opponent checks. Pocket nines may be the best hand, but I do not want to start building a large pot against this player. A 10 is not folding this flop ever. Club draws can call, and some 7x may continue once. There are also a lot of bad turns that can make this a lot harder to play, and we do want some pairs in our checkback range sometimes, so I check my option. The turn is the 4 of spades, and the big blind bets $17 into about 25. Pocket nines is still ahead of bluffs, club draws, straight draws, and random air that bets because I showed weakness on the flop. So I put in a call. The river pairs the deuce, my opponent checks, and I check back. They turn over ace-5 of clubs for a missed flush draw. Ace-5 of clubs may have called or raised if I bet the flop. The check gave my opponent the opportunity to place out a bet on the turn with no made hand, and I reached showdown without forcing one pair into a much larger pot. My hand had a clear plan from the flop: control the size of the pot and give worse hands room to put money in. Do not hear this and start checking every top pair or pocket pair on the flop. If the player will call too much with every 7, every draw, and small pocket pairs, place out the value bet and let them make that mistake. Against a straightforward player, check-in can keep the pot under control and create a bluff later. The player in front of you decides which option makes the most money. There is one more mistake that happens after the hand is over. Players use the river result to decide whether every earlier action was correct. In the earlier hand, if the river is a blank, my opponent checks, and King Jack wins at showdown. It is easy to believe the turn bet must have been good. A clean river does not change what the turn bet did. The same thing happens when the 6 of clubs comes on the river. Folding to the $130 river donk bet does not mean the flop bet was bad. Worse hands continued, so it had a clear meaning of why the bet was being placed. When you review a hand, hide the result for a moment and judge each decision using the information you had at the time. This will help you find the real mistake instead of blaming the river card or even the flop itself. Your own decisions are only half of the information available during a hand because the person across the table is giving you information too. Watch this next video because one of the timing or behavior changes I break down can make your next difficult river decision much easier.